Generally, the disruptor comes completely outside of the industry, not from within it. So I was fortunate to be a beginner. I say, whoa, that worked really good. That's interesting. I can't believe that works so good. Why did that work good? And then I will obsess over it. I've seen AI come through recently, and it's changed everything. All the old standards are up for grabs. And before that, we saw COVID, and all the old standards went out the window.
Hey, Jason, welcome to the show.
Steve, it is an honor and a pleasure from the bottom of my heart to be here today.
Oh, so the check cleared then?
And the check is cashed, and I've already spent it on hookers and blow.
Oh, there you go. I'm glad to see you didn't waste it. So I'm going to come out on the recording with an announcement, okay? And I suppose an apology. We first met many, many, many years ago through a dysfunctional, weird friend of ours called Joe Polish, Genius Network. And then I remember having dinner with you at a sushi restaurant in Encino. And out of all the people in the room, everyone was like puffing chest. I did this. I made $1 million before I went to the toilet in the morning. And then were you quiet. Now, you were smart. You only had to talk to you for a couple of minutes to realize you were plugged into stuff, but you weren't the big show. You weren't the big, and you're not the big performer. In fact, if you're in a room full of very notable people, I'm going to go as far as to say people could overlook you. Now, that being said, there is a quote that says, and it's got to be inaccurate now, known as the $250 million webinar man. You've got to be over that number.
You kind of quit counting after a while.
I'm sure you do. What I very, very quickly noticed, and I always try to find the power. Everyone's always got that person. Whenever you find someone that's an artist, a star, a rock star, hugely affluent, powerful, whatever, there's always that person next to him that's kind of like pulling the strings, got him there, or helped sustain him. So I always look for who's that person. And no matter who you speak to, Bob Proctor, Joe Polish, and most recently, with probably one of the biggest webinars out there released on his book launch, Alex Samosi, they publicly give you grace for all of their knowledge and webinar. How did you first, before we get into the relationships with them and what you did for them, when did you realize two things? The webinars were your playground and webinars were so financially fruitful. Let's jump in quick there.
Yeah, I knew it before I could do one even, Steve, both from a technical standpoint. I didn't know how to do anything at that point in time other than write articles for people for like $4 an article. And I saw the opportunity, but the other reason I couldn't do them was the internet wasn't fast enough and the technology wasn't stable enough. So I entered the market at the perfect time. A lot of success, a lot of people don't like to admit this, Steve, is you catch the right wave at the right time. Now, you have to know how to surf the surfboard, too. Otherwise, you could get killed very quickly. But I had seen teleseminars, and I noticed that they were super hot. People would come to them, get a lot of value from them, which I like. I like advertising that is inherently valuable. So it's not just, hey, it might be valuable after you pay me money. It's regardless of whether you pay me money, you walk away better than where you started. So that always appealed to me. So it naturally attracted it to me from that perspective. But I knew webinars would replace teleseminars. I could just feel it in my gut. Because if it was audio only and it worked well, imagine what it would look like if you could put the visuals in place. And so I got super excited, Steve. And here was the other opportunity. Me being completely a beginner was a huge advantage. I know you've spent some time with Elon Musk personally, and you've brought him into your groups and all that kind of stuff. And I always think about Elon in the sense of he came into the industry, or the automotive industry, and he didn't have the baggage of, well, it has to be done this way. He basically sat down and says, hey, do the wheels even need to be circular? Let's test every hypothesis. And now look at a most valuable car company in the world. Generally, the disruptor comes completely outside of the industry, not from within it. So I was fortunate to be a beginner. And I didn't have to. A lot of these people, here's what they did when they entered the webinar space. They either said, hey, listen, I know how to do teleseminars, so let me just kind of cram that into a webinar format, but not structurally change too much. Or they were like platform speakers, meaning that they would go and speak in front of an audience and sell from stage, and they'd say, let me just cram that in there. I learned very quickly on, Steve, that what you could get away with when people are polite in a room, because to get up and walk away from you when you're on stage, a lot of people won't do that. They don't like you, but they're nice. But on the internet, they will X that button so damn quickly if you're not interesting. So there's a lot of things that you can't get away with on a webinar that you could get away with on a stage. And so I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but nobody else does either. And I don't have any success that I could be lazy about and just try to square peg round hole it here. So let me just start with a blank slate. So the first webinars I ever did, it's so funny, were mind maps. This old technology that nobody seems to use anymore. That was my whole pitch deck, if you will, was a mind map. And it allowed me to just get in front of people, try some stuff out and see what happens.
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting this podcast. I know it's a brilliant one. But I wanted to talk to you about your room, your connections. Now, we know full well that great things come from great connections and great rooms. Now, if you're in a room full of people that will challenge you, inspire you, motivate you, and support you, then great. But if not, then maybe I have the solution for you. Head on over to stevedsims.com, look up Sims Distillery there, and join our community of creative disruptors. Those that are only not there to help you and motivate and actually give you information, but to support and answer questions. We very much vet the room to make sure that we support each other's growth. We all want each other to grow. So if you want to be in the right room, head on over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, and I'll see you inside my room. Enjoy the rest of the show. When was this?
2008.
See, a lot of people, a friend of mine once turned around and said to me, I got socks older than Google. We like to think that, it's always been like that, but a lot of this technology hasn't actually been around for long. I love the fact that you said you were fortunate by actually not knowing anything. And a lot of people today, and we all know this, especially, and we should mention that we're both, I'm on the faculty, but you're one of the co-founders of Driven, one of the greatest masterminds out there with Carson Muslim and Perry Belcher. There's a lot of experts that literally just go, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to get going.
Yep.
And they don't plan for perfection. They just go. And that's where all the education is. And you were ready to do that. So
That's right.
you saw an opportunity. You didn't let your lack of knowledge get in the way. In fact, if anything, you went, hey, that's good. I'm not burdened with, this is how it's always been done. And you actually started to get into it. When did you realize, hang on a minute, I'm quite good at this?
Yeah. The first one I did, it was crazy, Steve. And this is something I urge this to people. You've seen me tell Driven Mastermind members, and all of them are $1 million plus businesses, some of them multi-million dollar businesses. And I almost always, every time they're entering a new thing, give them the same strategic principle. I say, go to your audience and say, hey, listen, I don't know if this will work or not.
Yes.
Let me try it out. If it works, we all win big. But if it doesn't, you're only out, your time, maybe a few dollars if you want to be a guinea pig of mine. But let's see. I think it has promise, but I'm not sure. And that's always been my favorite framework to use in marketing. So when I first went to my audience, I had an audience of about 2,000-3,000 people. They were all buyers. None of them had paid me more than $17 for a product, because I really got my start in this business, Steve, selling really cheap products. Because I love to create them. I'm like, let me find one problem, solve it with one solution, create the product in one sitting. That was my MO. And so I built up a nice little buyer list of 2,000 to 3,000 people, but nobody was paying me any real money. I mean, there was for me at the time. I lived in Iowa. I mean, you could be rich on $100,000 in Iowa. Out here in LA, you could be a multimillionaire and you're still broke. Yeah. So I went to the audience and said, hey, listen, I got this. I want to try this new media I've never done before. It's called webinars. I think it could be a more powerful way to coach and serve and train you. But I've never done it before. So here's this wacky experiment I have. If you'd like to indulge me in it, I'm going to create my next product live on a webinar. And if you show up to this webinar, you will get the product for free. If you don't, then you can buy the product later, because I plan to sell it. Are you interested? And that was the campaign essentially that I rolled out, Steve. Was I didn't start webinars where, think about this, like if you're wanting to learn karate, you don't walk in and say, give me the black belt lesson day one. You get your ass kicked if you do that. You start with the white belt. You could be a full grown man and you're with like these 10 and 11-year-old girls, and that's who you're practicing with when you're first starting out. And so I think that's important for people to realize. I didn't just jump right into the pro level, which is selling on a webinar. I started with training on a webinar. And I did it in such a way where there was no way anybody can lose, me included. Nobody, but by setting the frame so low, it made me feel comfortable to try stuff out. So I get on and I do this webinar off of Mind Map, and I train to create a whole new product there. And here's the funniest thing. I thought everybody was going to show up because who wouldn't want a free product, right? 17 people showed up to the first webinar that I ever did. 17. That was it.
Did you get many say, you say that the people that turned up got it for free, so 17 people got it for free. Was there much traction from people paying for it afterwards?
That's a great question. So everybody who showed up for the most part loved it. I mean, I think some people showed up and then just, went off and just tuned in and tuned out or whatever, but we had such good testimonials. And I say we now, but back then it was literally just me. The testimonials were insane. I was like, damn. So I go back to my audience the next day and I say, hey, listen, you missed it. You think I was just joking and playing around, No, you broke curfew, so now you're going to get grounded. I mean, I didn't say it like that, but I said, hey, listen, I told you I was going to sell the product for $37. I'm going to give you a second chance. You can buy it for $27. And here's what the people who just attended it said. Are you in? And that product sold more than any product that I had ever sold to that audience before. And I learned a lot of lessons that day, but the major lesson, the takeaway for anybody listening here is I don't think of marketing as campaigns that we run. I think of them as stories that unfold in real time. And it's a story where the audience could influence the result. They can participate in it. They get excited by being part of it, and they can influence the outcome potentially. So they saw this unfold in real time. What is more believable, what is more exciting than that? And they saw also that there's a penalty for non-compliance. And then they knew it was good because it just happened. And so I learned so many lessons that day, but the best thing I learned was by training on a webinar, I got comfortable in a super low stakes environment with the technology. I got comfortable with how do I communicate this? Should I do it this way? Should I do it that way? What really matters? What doesn't matter? And I felt really good about doing it again, which is what I did. I did it again a few weeks later. And this is so fascinating, Steve, because I had a product at the time, it was about $17. And it taught people how to write sales letters, because back then nobody knew how to do that. And it was a 12-step process that I had developed. And I said, listen, a lot of people who bought my cheap little ebook, it was $7, and then I got brave and rose the price to $17. I said, so many people have asked me, they want to go further in it. They want to go deeper with it. They want more examples. And so you know what I'm thinking? I'm going to do my first ever group coaching program. I've never done something like this before. You want to be a founding member of it. I'm going to take each of these 12 steps, break them down one per week, and I'm going to use that new webinar technology that we just used on this last thing that I showed you. I'm going to do that. So 12 sessions over 12 weeks, you can come live. And I want to make it very personalized. So I'm limiting the space. I think we limited, and again, me back then limited it to 20, maybe 25 spots, something like that. And I sold the thing for a whopping, I believe, $200, Steve. I was getting brave, man. So that was my second webinar that I ever done. It was for fulfillment on a product that people paid for, which was the same product they paid in an ebook, but just in a different modality.
Now, for a start, let's highlight this. You release rough. You don't try to polish anything. Now, I know you, and I've spent time with you, and we've known each other for quite a few years, actually. And you're filthy rich now. Good for you. You deserve it. But the thing that I think is your true talent falls on two levels, and probably many more, because you're hyper intelligent, early adopter. You release rough. I've constantly heard you go, hey, I've got an idea. Now, you're super smart. I'm sure you've planned this thing already, but you never release perfection. You're always kind of like, hey, wait a minute. Look, I want to try something.
Yep.
And I've heard you kind of frame it many times like that. And of course, once you get to see you and recognize certain things, you're like, I got that. I picked up on that again. But what people will also get from here is you are incredibly conversational. Now, a lot of people will go, and you've actually been a speaker at my Speakeasy Masterminds, and you did this sitting on a bar stool with no screens around you. And I remember you getting up there and sitting on this bar stool. I'm thinking, he's devoid of any other way of grabbing our attention other than him. And you had it.
Yes.
because you literally straight away going, I want to ask you a question. You had this conversation. Did you realize that you were a great conversationalist early, or was this something that, like everything, you worked on for the better end of a product?
I had no idea. I mean, conversation instead of presentation. I do say that a lot, but it was born out of a necessity because I didn't know it at the time, but I still do have ADHD out the years. And if I can't find a way to harness this ability to focus only for short spurts of time before I kind of get distracted, I'm host. If I can't manage that and get it under control, I can't function. I can't do anything. I can't pick the kids up from school on time because I'll forget that kind of stuff. And so to me, the conversation was born out of the necessity is this is how I stay engaged. This is how I don't get distracted. This is how I don't get a project half finished and then give up on it. This is how I freebase and shoot up marketing into my veins as quickly as possible without getting too elaborate about it. It's a strength and it's a weakness, but I was able to harness as much of the strength of it as possible because think about it, I'm thinking out loud essentially. So I don't have to plan it too much and I can have a conversation with the audience and then I could iterate or I could adjust on the fly. So I don't have to be too dialed in too much ahead of time. It sucks. It's hard to scale and build a business that way. So you got to work around some of those limitations, but it's ultra effective, both from a productivity standpoint, because it's the least amount of from idea to implementation that you can get. And it's also effective because people will buy stuff that they've influenced more likely than they will buy stuff that they're just thrown at them. So they can participate in it so they can take ownership of it. And then the ultimate ownership is to buy the thing at the end of it. And I didn't know that was a thing when I started. But once I recognized it, here's really another true superpower. And you know that I do this, Steve, is once I see the lesson, I can recognize it. And then I can backfill structure around it. I say, whoa, that worked really good. That's interesting. I can't believe that works so good. Why did that work good? And then I will obsess over it. And then I will build structure around it later. Now that I know that the thing is effective, let me figure it out. And can I build a system to be able to do it? So again, I don't get distracted in the future. I have a streamlined way of tapping back into that and then using it more formally as opposed to just kind of shoot from the hip.
Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, got ADHD, that's all going around. One of the things that I like about you, and you are establishing it in here, is that you're constantly paying attention to what's going on. When it works, you go, whoa, hold on a minute. Let's grab that and do it again. I'm imagining that you also do the same for when the shit hits the fan and it goes wrong, and you can go, I really played all my cards on that and it went wrong. Why did it go wrong? Let's look into that. That's so right. You're constantly refining and sharpening your tools, literally on the fly. Is that like an engineering kind of mathematical kind of brain set that you had, or was it just something intrinsic in you that you want to find out where it's going?
It's tough, and I'll tell you why it's tough. And I've learned to get better at it. Two things that have always been established, I don't know where they came from, maybe a past life. I have no idea. But I've always had insanely high expectations for myself. And so it is rare that I meet those expectations. And so because I don't meet them, I get frustrated and figure out where's the gaps? Where are the things that I can improve upon? What am I lacking? Now, my dear friend, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and then Dan Sullivan, they wrote a book together called The Gap and the Gain. It is so much better to focus on here's where I've gained since I've started and have that positive reinforcement versus here's what I lack, here's how I can get better. But if you look at any high achiever, Michael Jordan's the best example of this. Watch The Last Dance. The dude is still bitter many years later. I don't care how many championships he won. He still thinks about that one shot that he missed here or that one game that didn't quite go his way. In order to play at his highest level, sometimes he would invent things that other players said that they didn't even say just to get him pissed off. So he would go and put up 50 on them that night. That's kind of where I was always from, of the thing of how could we make this better? Well, what didn't go well and what can be improved upon it, and being obsessive over the deficiency in order to improve the deficiency. It makes you damn good, but you got to be very careful because it also can make you miserable. if you let it. And for some many years, it made me miserable. I was thinking even this with Alex's launch. I'm glad I've gotten better at it, Steve. With Hormozi's launch, he sold 100,000 books in 20 minutes, and we had talked back and forth. He hired me for a day of consulting, and we spent a day on part of it on the offer, what the offer should look like, part of it on the webinar flow from, start here, go here, do this, reveal the offer here, and then part of it on the amount of time he would spend for that big buildup before the reveal that it's all free, right? And I was watching the webinar and it's like, oh, it should have been just, 3 minutes faster over here. This should have, and I'm like, dude, just shut the hell up, right? It's like, how better could he have done it than the way that he did it? And I didn't bring it back to him with my notes, and I have notes on all of the things that can be improved. I said, you did a great job. Fantastic, amazing. I'm in awe of your performance, because he's taken it to a level that I've never even begin to touch. And so I've learned to do that better in my own life, Steve. But at the same time, there's always that part of me that has that killer instinct of, I don't care how good it is. I don't care if it broke the damn record. And we've broken some records. Here's the things that if we want to optimize and improve on, here's where there's still more leverage. And that's where it comes from. It just has always been an innate part of me. And I think you when you combine it with, I do have a high level of intelligence, which I am fortunate and blessed to have. And then I've worked on creating it, is I can suss that out. Because a lot of people, then they post-mortem things, because that's what we do. We always post-mortems, these different promotions and such. They can be like a dog running around chasing its tail. If you don't know what to post-mortem and you don't know where the deficiency is and where to leverage, you'll drive yourself insane and you won't get better. You'll get worse, because you could spend that time instead doing something more productive.
Have we missed the window for doing webinars for our products or services?
I don't think we've even peaked. I've seen AI come through recently, and it's changed everything. All the old standards are up for grabs. And before that, we saw COVID, and all the old standards went out the window. Unfortunately for the world, but very fortunate for me, the pandemic made us more money than I would have ever anticipated ever making in my life, because everybody was forced to be indoors. Everybody who had a business where they say, well, one day, someday we'll figure out this virtual stuff, had to figure out this virtual stuff. And all roads tended to point to me at the end of the day. So the deal flow that came through and the impact that I could have directly, and then those that I taught, the impact that they could have, was insane. And so I think we think too small too often. Is the webinar is just a way for you to communicate value to your audience. It's one of many ways to do it. It's a tool in the toolkit, but it has such inherent value to it, because ultimately what the webinar is it's your I have a dream speech. That's what I always tell my clients. It's the 60 minutes to 90 minutes of you at your very best. It is you going out there and saying, this is the paradigm that I'm offering up that is going to change the world. And how could that ever not be effective? So people think, oh, webinar is a tool to sell something. Yeah, you can do it with that. But it's ultimately you at your very best for 60 minutes in a way that the masses can consume it and get the most out of it. That will always be valuable. And then occasionally something will be disruptive that will make it even way more valuable. And usually when that happens, the tide goes up, it recedes a little bit, but the overall net baseline of how valuable it is as a media has continued to go up. And I think it will continue to go up for a long time to come. Now, what has gone down is half-assed webinars. There used to be a golden era, Steve, where if you just said, I'm doing a webinar, people would drop everything, run to it, and they would tolerate mediocrity because it was novel. And that's gone. So yeah, good riddance. But for the rest of us, now there's more to eat.
All right, so I've got a couple of things. I remember you actually throwing out a just a flippant comment one day when you were actually at the Genius Network event. You said to stand out, you've got to give away for free what everyone sells.
Yep.
And that kind of like sat me up. And I wasn't even in that world at the time. This was when I was in my concierge days and I was sitting in there. And I was like, oh, I like that. That was good. Let me throw an under the bus question here. Alex Hormozi is great. He knows what he's doing. He's powerful. He's confident. He's great in his own skin. He knows his persona. He knows how to deliver. But how much of the success of that webinar was down to the structure
Yep.
versus down to Alex?
Probably almost none of it was down to the structure of the webinar.
Really?
Yeah, I should listen to my advice more often, Steve, because I should give away more stuff. Alex took what I said and he took it to a completely next level, which is good for him. Look at the results that he's gotten. We literally, the first conversation we had when he was coming into this launch, because he told me the idea many months in advance. It was driving me nuts, Steve, because I had to sit on it and stay quiet because nobody was allowed to know. I had some very prioritized information. And the first question I asked him was, why even do it? And we sat there and we talked for a while about, is it even worth doing? And some of the early ideas, which he ended up not doing in terms of other offer constructions that he was thinking of. I was like, dude, if you want to do that, I said, in 20 minutes with, 10 text messages, you could sell out these packages, some of the packages that he was thinking about. So I said, there has to be a reason to do it that isn't sales related. It has to perform some other function if you're going to do it that way. And we went back and forth on the idea of whether you should even do it or not, because the goodwill that he had built up to that point in time was so powerful. Anytime you cash in goodwill, there's a cost associated with that. But if you can continue to extend the goodwill further and further, then the value of that goodwill will continue to compound. And so I'm like, do you want to cash it in? I think maybe you should consider letting it ride some more. Now, Alex has done the thing that we all hope to do, but very few of us end up doing it, is he doesn't need any of that over there. He doesn't need to sell a single book ever. He doesn't need it to ever make money for him. That thing serves as a feeder system for his real business, which is acquiring companies, which, by the way, is also the best position. Everybody else is a seller and he's a buyer. I mean, so he's just taken everything to the nth level. Good for him. And so, like, A, why even do it? And B, if we're going to do it, what's the real cause here? And the real cause is to create a spectacle. I don't know if that's what Alex said, or I'm just in general now extrapolating here. The real cause is to create a spectacle so everybody starts talking about it. Now, if most people can start talking about it in a positive manner, all the better, because as you see, the way that most people create a spectacle is where half the people hate you and half the people love you. And that's generally how people play that game. Alex has figured out a way to play the game where almost everybody loves him, and he can create a spectacle simultaneously. So the webinar was just the function of really taking that and creating the spectacle. I think he could have done a lot of other things, but I will tell you, it speaks to how valuable the webinar is as a media, that of everything he could have done and could have chosen to do, and he's smart, how is it that he picked the webinar? And why did he pick the webinar? I wonder, because it probably is the biggest way to have the impact. But think about it this way, Steve. A hot woman is a hot woman. Doesn't matter what dress she's wearing, okay? I'm speaking your language right now, right? A beautiful woman is a beautiful woman, whether she's in a sundress or whether she's in a ballroom gown. And so the reality is like the value as the brand, in this case being the hot woman in this weird metaphor, is she can choose a variety of shoes, she could choose a variety of dresses, but she still wants to look her best. And so what's the best shoes, what's the best dress, what's the best purse to take her out and show off how amazing and incredible she is? And I don't know if that metaphor makes sense, but that's kind of one of the ways of looking at it.
It does, and it does, but I think you've just exposed yourself from the first statement I made, where you almost talk yourself down. There is a reason Alex Hormozi came to you, and I know how much he paid, and I'm not going to mention it, but he paid a decent amount of money to get expert advice.
That's right.
So I am positive, as good as Alex is, jumping on that webinar, he would have been fine. And again, he's coming from a position where I don't need it to pay the rent. Great position to be in. But he wanted to drive as much impact as possible. And as you already said while you were watching it and doing the post-mortem, there was a structure. Enter this in. All that could have been 3 minutes before. But now lay this down. Offer the feed. Now give it for free. And anyone that didn't watch the webinar, hey, you're lost, because it was a masterclass on how to do a webinar. But he got that from you.
Yeah.
Now, I've asked you if people have missed the window. You said no. I've asked you, did Alex need you, basically? Well, while you're being very nice and humble, Alex felt he did because he paid you.
That's
and
right.
I love to listen to reviews from people that actually paid for the product.
That's right.
Those freeloaders, freebies, I don't care about that. When you actually get your credit card out and you pay, there's no better testimonial on the planet than that person. You've taken all that and you put it into a book.
I have, yeah.
Tell us about the book.
Yeah, this is really a lot of what Alex did on the webinar came from this book in terms of the specific word for word closes that he uses. Like 100 people texted me, "Oh, he's using your stuff right now." I'm like, "Of course he is." So one to many is the book. I wrote the book. This is funny, Steve, because I say the book was written in 2017, but I think it is most appropriate now in 2023 because I'm 6 years ahead of everybody when it comes to this stuff. So you don't want what I'm doing now because it's way too complicated because I've kept iterating. What I have in this book right now is probably the most effective thing you could learn in 2023 on how to do webinars.
So, okay, let's make it easy. So where's the best place for people to go and grab this book?
Amazon, baby. You go straight to Amazon. Get this thing. I think the Kindle's $10. I don't know if we have any hardcovers because it's been selling really good lately. So maybe get yourself a paperback. But however you can get it at Amazon. And it's pretty much Steve, if I had to do it again, I wouldn't write the book this way because I wrote it as a workbook, which I think has the most impact. So it's made the most people the most amount of money who use it. But it's not certainly this mass market. I'm going to sell 100, 200, 500,000 copies of the thing because it is a workbook in the form of a book. It is a step-by-step procedure. In the introduction, here are the 5 things that you do. Content, here's how you create a paradigm shift. Transition, this is how you make it seamless from education to selling. Close, this is the 5-step process that we use for all of the closes that we do on our webinar. So it is a workbook, and you will be able to implement it exactly step by step, the most common format or formula that I use when I sell on webinars.
How much is you say it's only available in paperback or Kindle? How much?
I don't know. I haven't checked, but it's like $10 for the Kindle, $20 for the paperback. Sounds ridiculous like that.
So the bottom line of it is, and again, I'm not going to blurt it out, but I know how much Alex paid you.
Yeah.
And he's using the information that you got texts on stuff word for word that you used in his book. If that's not an advert to buy the book, I don't know what the friggin' hell is. Now, you also do a ton of content that's for free. So any of those freeloaders or poor people out there or just tire kickers that want to know if Jason's real, I've noticed that over the past few years, apart from co-founding one of the best masterminds out there, you do a lot of active content on LinkedIn and Instagram and all of those.
Yes.
I've got 2 questions. One, what are those links and how do they follow you? And then quite simply, as a person with ADHD, introvert tendencies, why do you put the content out? So first of all, how can they follow you? What's your favorite go-to social channels?
YouTube, for sure. Just kicking it off, actually. So it might feel like yours, Steve, but we just really started pushing in the last 6 months. I'm brand new to the space. So go find me on YouTube, Jason Fladlien. Just plug me in. You'll see me there because I'm posting pretty heavily right now. And the real question, Steve, which I wonder myself, is why I started, because I was not wanting to start for a very long time. And by the way, I started on YouTube in 2005. Can you believe that? So the year YouTube was created before Google owned it, I was playing around on YouTube. It's the curse of being too early, which is regrettably something I've done many times in my life. And then I'm like, this thing will never amount to anything. And then I moved on. I started podcasting, dude, in 2003. And I'm like, nobody will ever like this stuff. And then I moved on. This is what I believe. I think I'm right. And it's taken me a long time to figure this out because I tried a lot of other stuff too. The way we drive traffic in our business, Steve, and we did a launch that had $57.9 million, biggest launch in the space, bigger than, Dean's and Tony's launch when they do their launches, all that kind of jazz. And we did it with 100% affiliates. So the way I typically drive traffic is I get affiliates to say, hey, listen, if I give my traffic to Fladlien, he's going to make me more money than if I put it anywhere else. So we use conversion, which is what I'm the best at, to create traffic. But the problem with that is, like with anything, it always reaches a limit. We feel like we're optimized to that point, to the limit. And anything that we can do to improve it will be incremental at best. So a lot more effort for a lot less additional output. So then I've evaluated and I've tried and I've attempted different methods to increase my reach, mostly through paid advertising. And I'm not very good at it, and I don't want to get good at it. So, but organic has come back on my radar, because back in the day, organic meant like Google, and it meant like SEO, or it meant Facebook with these news feeds that would change. So you could be visible one day and you weren't visible the next day. And now we've seen a time where I think the feeds have gotten to where you truly, if you understand it and you can unlock the combination, you can go from obscurity to reaching millions of people overnight. It's really hard to get there, but I think content is the leverage, the right type of content created. And I know if I can do that in webinars, I can do that in social media. But I'm trying to figure out the combination right now, and I'm happy to fail in public. That's the other big thing, Steve, that I want to leave everybody with, is be okay with failing repeatedly in public. It's the best way. It's the best way to be successful, is to fail repeatedly in public, because it will force you to get better in a way. It will create accountability to get better in a way nothing else will. And even your quote unquote failures can be successes. So in the small time that we've started with the limited reach that I'm playing with right now, I've already got a bunch of wins. And I'm like, ooh, this is awesome. And so I think most people should fail more often in public, because if you have sincerity and you lead with the attempt to enhance somebody else's life, how could you go wrong?
Oh, that's beautiful. There's been so many nuggets in here. I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to put the one-to-many link in there. You got to go out and you got to get this on Amazon. Jesus Christ, it's the price of a couple of Starbucks cappuccinos, and you've got what Alex Amose paid a lot more for. Jason, you're one of my favorite people in the planet. You know that. I love you. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you for spending time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Look after yourself, pal. Well, that was another episode of the Art of Making Things Happen podcast with me, your host, Steve Sims. If you like it, you know the scoop. Subscribe, tell your friends, share it around. Let them get benefit from this juice. And of course, if you want to change the room you're in, join Sims Distillery. Jump over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, or you can find a link directly from that website. That's the room where creative disruptors get together to actually help each other become better. If you've got standards or you want higher standards, join the right room. See you next time.